Hello everyone, thank you for coming today for our March Book Sandwiched In. We are very happy to have everyone here, and I can't believe it's almost spring and we're already getting to the end of our series. Just for a few housekeeping announcements to start. My name is Dina Viviani. I'm the programming librarian here at White Memorial Library, and I want to mention that for safety purposes, if there is a need to evacuate the building, the door on the far wall, my right, your left, is the closest exit. For anyone using a hearing aid, we invite you to take advantage of our induction loop system. It amplifies all sound coming through the microphone. And along those lines, if we have time for Q&A at the end, please wait till you have this microphone so that everyone can hear and participate. Please silence or turn off your cell phones now so as not to disrupt the speaker. And we'd like to thank the Friends of BML for sponsoring this program, and so many that we do. Please grab one of our March program brochures. They are on the table in the back. We have 3 other book discussions coming up this month. We have our new African Voices, we have our bestseller book club in person, and we have our Zoom book discussion group. We also have some live music and a presentation coming up just tomorrow on Friday. And then we've got a lot of art programs coming up. We do have wait lists on some of them, but we're planning to get more through the spring and summer, so please look out for those if you are an arts and crafts person. And on the table in the back, we are out of copies. They're all checked out of today's title, but if you want to hold, please stop at the information desk. Holds are now free, so you can ask one of the librarians to put something on hold for you. And then just to fill up our table, I've got the other book by Amor Towles over there, one of his first title, Rules of Civility, and then some other books by Thurdy Unriger, who is going to be our one of our authors that we're reviewing later this season. So, with that, I will do a little intro for our presenter.
Dina?
Yes?
I just think you should mention that next time is not a Thursday.
Oh, Hinda's right, yes. Our April presentation on House of Endless Waters, thank you. It is not on the first Thursday due to a conflict that the presenter had. It is on Wednesday, April 26th, I believe, at 12 o'clock in this room. So please make sure to grab one of our flyers, and if anyone questions if that date is correct, yes, it is correct, even though it is different. Thank you, Hinda. All right, our Brighton Town Court Judge, Karen Morris, is a reader, writer, professor, and magician, among other things. She's the author of Law Made Fun Through Harry Potter's Adventures and Law Made Fun Through Downton Abbey, as well as other law books, textbooks, and articles. I don't know if the Game of Thrones one is still being worked on, but I found this when I was trolling the internet.
I know I've left that aside.
That's been aside for now. But I recently learned through her interview in 55 Plus magazine that came out last month that she attends magic conferences and likes to use wizardry to help her students understand law at MCC. And as you can see from her props, she would like to use some of that to show us parts of our book today. I also learned she plans to retire after nearly 30 years. How many years?
29.
29 years as our judge, but we hope that gives her more time to read and review books for us here at Brighton Memorial Library. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for coming. It's fun to be here with you to review the book by Amor Towles, The Lincoln Highway. It is a book about an odyssey, which is defined as a long and eventful or adventurous journey, which clearly fits. I also, for me, it calls up the Beatles song, The Long and Winding Road, or Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There are lots of twists and turns as the journey unfolds. Let me just ask, how many of you have read it? Wow, fabulous, okay. So there are 4 main characters and lots of unusual ones encountered along the way, including the down and out, those just trying to survive, the mean and the ugly, and the hero rescuers. Some of these characters are endearing and some are hateful. I think of the book as, the term that comes to mind for me is fantastical, which is a story that borders on fantasy. Part of the book, to read it and appreciate it, you need to suspend reality. The timing of characters, their appearances, and stereotypic traits are too perfect for real life. The The book, I think, can be viewed best as a collection of short stories or vignettes defined by encounters with each of the various characters. The book itself is almost 600 pages, which is a pretty hefty read. The book begins with the departure of 3 boys from the juvenile work farm in Kansas to the home of Emmett, which is in Nebraska. Interesting, the warden drives the Emmett to his home. So of these 3 characters, one was officially and legally released from the farm, and 2 escaped. What led them to the work farm? And this is, I think, a central theme of the book. How did they end up at this work farm, which is a juvenile, sort of penal place? So Emmett ended up there, and you obviously, to get there, the residents have to be below the legal age to commit a crime, which is, or below the age to be fully responsible for criminal activity. That's 18 in most states, and have to have committed some criminal act. In Emmett's case, he was responding to a bully. Emmett hit that bully, never intending to kill him. The bully was knocked backwards, hit his head on pavement. It was the last night of a fair that was in town, and that victim was in fact killed. Interesting, in law, to be responsible for murder requires intent. So the fact that Emmett did not intentionally kill this person reduces the charge from murder. We do have the next level of criminally causing a death called manslaughter, which is unintentional, but the killer engages in acts that are reckless, perceives that there's a risk of death from the action, and nonetheless engages in that action. So when you hit somebody, of course, anything can happen, including them falling backwards and hitting their head. So for Emmett, he ended up at this work farm juvenile penal institution from a manslaughter charge. For Duchess, he was age 16 at the time of his crime. He was living in a hotel with his dad. Interesting, not a loving dad. The dad was sleeping on the floor, on the bed, while Duchess was relegated to sleep on the floor. Duchess was befriended by a clown, a performance clown, who was low on his luck due to the depression, they were friends, and Duchess visited this clown on a daily basis. There came a time, and always the clown left the door open a little bit, expecting that Duchess would come. One day, Duchess goes to that room in the hotel, and the door was not open. And ultimately, Duchess discovered that the clown had committed suicide. The clown had apparently a very expensive watch. Duchess's dad got involved. Dad took the watch before the police came. When the police came, there was a discovery that the watch was missing. The dad hid it on Duchess, expecting that Duchess, as a young boy, would face very little consequence and be released from the criminal justice system to Dad. Well, that didn't happen. The watch was expensive enough that it was a felony to have stolen it, and Duchess ended up in this penal work farm because of that, which of course doesn't endear any of us to Dad. And then there's Wooly, and Wooly saw a fire truck that he thought somebody had misplaced because there weren't apparently any firefighters around. So Wooly got in the truck and drove the truck. And while he drove it, there was a fire. The fire truck was needed. The firefighters couldn't find the truck. Firefighters from a neighboring community had to come. That took time. There was significant damage. And Willie ended up in this work farm as a result of taking the truck. Some comments about these work farms. So these were correction facilities where inmates were forced to do manual labor. It could have been agriculture, it could have been logging, it could have been mining. There were many reports of substandard food in prisons and in these work farms. So the work farms developed with good intentions to produce agricultural products to feed prisoners and to provide food for orphanages, for asylums, also local food cupboards and shelters, and some of the food was sold for a profit. In its best version, these farms produced food, reduced costs for prisons, and teach prisoners, including these young boys, a trade, and plus provide fresh food and vegetables, thereby improving the health of inmates and allowing them to gain skills in sustainable agriculture, in ecology, and conservation. However, sometimes there was abuse. Particularly in the southern states, these prisons, these work camps, leased the prisoners to large local plantations and private mines sometimes. The system then earned a profit. The prisoners earned no pay and often faced dangerous conditions. We do, of course, have a 13th Amendment that prohibits slavery, but it explicitly exempts convicts. So there were, not so much for younger folks, but older folks, the people of color were really abused with these programs. The state, and particularly in southern states, saw ways to make money by leasing out these convicts, so they wanted more convicts. And so they developed what were called black codes. These were explicitly applied to African Americans and authorized imprisonment for minor offenses like loitering, breaking curfew, not carrying proof of employment. And so particularly blacks were arrested under these charges. They were imprisoned and then they were leased out for work and the state made money. Today, it's been determined that at any age, these camps are ineffective for correction, and often the skills that particularly young people are taught are not usable after release. They're outdated skills. There is a movie, if you're interested in this issue, that features prison farms and forced prison labor, Cool Hand Luke, from 1967 with Paul Newman. There were also, this part of the storyline brings up for me issues in punitive facilities generally for young people, not just the work farms. And there are often were reports of corporal punishment, solitary confinement, increased studies show likelihood of recidivism. These were young people who, when they came out, were less likely to finish high school. Being in these facilities confirmed their identity as criminals, increased their anger, their trauma, their reliance on physical force, and oftentimes, in order to protect themselves, these kids joined gangs while they were in these facilities and thus became more violent and assaultive. This is an ongoing issue, how to address the young folks who commit crimes and how to ensure facilities that hopefully are corrective and safe. An issue that the book brings up is the involvement of parents and how important, caring, loving, present parents are. The experience proves and studies confirm that children need love, attention, parameters in their life. That is the role in the first instance of parents. The three characters in the book who ended up at the work farm, Emmett, Duchess, and Wooly, all had parents who were absent, neglectful. They were absent either intentionally or as an unfortunate result of illness. They were neglectful or outright abandoned their parental duties or role models. Let's look at each one. Wooly's dad died in World War II. His mom remarried and moved to Palm Springs. He was sent to numerous boarding schools, always was in trouble and expelled. He was close with his sister, but he was disliked by her husband, Dennis. So there wasn't really a loving, caring figure in his young life. Duchess had his mother was a beautiful woman, a performer. She sang love songs at all the great supper clubs, the Rainbow Room, the Store Club, and was reported to be quite doting on Duchess. She was compared, and I must say that our author makes lots of references to people and events of the time period, the 50s, that were unknown to me and required a lot of research. That was kind of fun. So one of them was, the author compares Duchess's mother to Edith Piaf, P-I-A-F, who was a French singer and a cultural icon, regarded as France's greatest popular singer. She lived from 1915 to 1963. Unfortunately, this woman, Duchess' mom, died of tuberculosis when Duchess was quite young. Sadly, he told friends that his mother abandoned him. So he was probably young, didn't appreciate and didn't understand about illness and death, and thought that she had just left him. His dad, this Harrison Hewitt, turns out to be quite a character in the book. He's an entertainer, but often down on his luck, had to scrounge for gigs, sometimes stole money and food, lived in that shady hotel, ironically called the Hotel Happiness. The dad engaged in various frauds. When he didn't pay, he often owed money to hotels and was able to leave without paying because he would put blackface on his face, carry his suitcase, figured he'd be confused as a porter, and nobody would stop him to to try and make good on his bill before he left the hotel. In our law, if a parent commits a crime in the presence of a child, that parent is guilty of a crime called endangering the welfare of a child, sort of showing the child suggesting and demonstrating to the child that this kind of action, this criminal action, is permissible. So that would be EWOC. Also, some other things with Duchess. His dad sometimes worked at the circus. At age 11, Duchess would work in the lounge upstairs, which was where the brothel was. He took customers' hats, he poured drinks, he apparently made significant money up there, all of which Dad took, and left none for him. At age 8, Dad left Duchess at a Catholic orphanage with a story about being the child's uncle, and the parents were deceased. Interesting, Sister Agnes, who was head of that orphanage, she didn't believe the story and commented about hearing many stories when people would leave off a child that she didn't believe, which of course, is sad when we think about orphanages, but underscores how important parents are to a child. With Emmett and Billy, their mother left them after a July 4th celebration, just abandoned them, never to return. Billy was under age 1 at that time. Emmett was about 10. His dad tried numerous occupations, unsuccessful, ultimately attempted farming, and then he died when the boys were 10 and 18, owing money on the farm, which was repossessed by the bank. So a formula to help kids grow up into caring, responsible, and well-adjusted adults is a childhood filled with love, affection, and guidance from responsible parents who stay the course and arrange for appropriate guardians in the event of illness or death. You parents can provide in a will who will be the guardian in the event of death and can designate somebody whose parenting skills and philosophies coincide with the parents who are writing the will. That directive, no, is informative to the judge, not binding, but influential. Ultimately, the best interest of the child is what controls who will receive guardianship in the event of a death, but parents can provide and can identify who they think would be a good choice, and that is influential. Again, not binding, but influential on the judge. Interesting wills, well, speaking of wills and testaments, so at the very end of the book, there is a reliance on a letter that Willie wrote about an inheritance that he received that was in the safe, and that in it he identifies, let me just read you part of that. Dated the 20th of June, 1954, and addressed to whom it may concern. The letter stated that the undersigned, that was Woolley, being of sound mind and body, left 1/3 of his $150,000 trust fund to Mr. Emmett Watson, 1/3 to Duchess Hewitt, and 1/3 to Billy. To do with as they please, and it was signed most sincereliest, which I love Bullet. So sincereliest is a great word, a combination of sincerely and sincerest. There was another word like that, absolutively, or that was combination between absolute and positively, yes. So I like that our author played with words in that way. One other thing about this will, Woolley had handed down the money. This was how Billy and Emmett justified getting their share, saying that Woolley had handed it down by means of a last will and testament that was duly signed and dated. Know that that would not be an effective will in our legal system. To have a will not only requires it be signed and dated, there needs to be witnesses, it needs to be notarized, and the person who's writing the will needs to declare in the presence of the witness that, and convince the witnesses that they are of sound mind, that they understand the contents of the document, and that the document accurately reflects their wishes. Okay, the time period of this book, 1954. So this was the year of Brown versus Board of Education. This was a period, an unproud period of our history in relations with people of color. It was also, and of course, Brown versus Board of Education held that separate but equal when it comes to schools is no longer the law of the land. It's no longer fulfilling its original purpose. Equal protection of the law requires integration. This was also the year of the Montgomery bus boycott, with Rosa Parks taking her place on the white area in a bus. She was prosecuted, and the Montgomery bus boycott began. There were limited career paths for men of color. Let me read you part. This is a quote from Ulysses, another interesting character in the book. He says, as a black man, whether you end up carrying a mailbox, operating an elevator, pumping gas, or doing time, you're going to be wearing a uniform. So that sort of laid out the options for men of color. Interesting with the Montgomery bus boycott, part of what motivated the black residents of that city to, for a year, boycott the buses was that blacks were earning only half as much as whites. Today we hear about generational wealth. This is an illustration of how that generational wealth is deprived from generations later. People, our contemporaries, whose parents and grandparents did not have the money to pass on to subsequent generations, unlike many white families. Brown versus Board of Education, there was non-compliance, and one might interpret, I would interpret Brown versus Board of Education to say separate but equal is dead. The many places that were resistant were trying to confine it to education only. The guards at the work camp were overheard casting dispersions on people of color. There was a character you may remember who was in the area where Emmett resided at the work farm called Tommy Ledoux. Tommy Ledoux was an Oklahoman who believed blacks should be housed separately and eat at their own tables. You may remember Townhouse, who was the black lad who was at the work camp, and this Tommy Ledoux tried to frame him, putting stolen Oreo cookies in his locker. And then we know of Warden Ackerley, who was very much a stickler for punishment and meted out twice the punishment to people of color. That was his position, and he made that very clear. So when there was solitary confinement, there was using corporal punishment. If you were someone of color in that work camp, you were going to get double the punishment. Fortunately, we saw Warden Williams, who was very much a reformer, who comes on the scene and included some classes and limited the amount of work that was required of the lads who were at the work camp. But that, I think it's important to keep in mind that timing of what our country was experiencing relating to racial relations. And another interesting issue, what I tried to do was to pull some themes from the book, was how the sameness with which we spend our time. So Woolley, who had been at the boarding schools and then the work farm, was very discontented with what he thought was the sameness of life. He didn't like that, and as he looked ahead, he could see only more of the same, with each day being the same. He had one, near the end of the book, what he called a one-of-a-kind day, which really excited him. It was different from all the others. He did numerous adventures that were not normally included in his day. Interesting, the mother of Emmett and Billy also felt joy from being free from her daily life of caring for the kids, and the book suggests that's what prompted her to abandon the kids. so that similar day in and day out of caring for kids was problematical for her. Unfortunate and inexcusable, but that theme of wanting some variation in life is a reminder of the importance to spice up our life. I once heard on TV somebody say holidays are like punctuation, that they should be celebrated, and that gives something new to work towards and think about and have fun with. I say find new and fun things to do. Reach out beyond your comfort level, and I think that our author was trying to say to us, have some fun, branch out beyond your norms. Another theme here was suicide, sadly. So we had the clown who hanged himself. We had Wooly who took the pills. He just couldn't tolerate this day-to-day, everything the same. And that last, as he was leaving life and having his last thoughts after taking the pills, what he recalled was that one-of-a-kind day, all the things that he loved. F.A.O. Schwartz, tea at the Plaza Hotel with his sister, the statue, visiting the statue of Abe Lincoln, going to the circus, going over the Brooklyn Bridge, meeting Professor Abernathy, another interesting character in the book. All of that was part of what he was thinking, that reinforcing that those one-of-a-kind days are important in our lives. And then on the suicide theme, Duchess unintentionally, I think, killed himself in a boat. He sort of had what for him was a Hobson's choice, either save the money from scattering by the wind or upset the boat. And he chose, and by upsetting the boat, by preventing the money from scattering, he was going to upset the balance of the boat. Then he's not a swimmer, the boat capsized, and he ended up drowning. His last thoughts were, "The rest is silence." These were the last words of Hamlet. Interesting how the author interspersed numerous Shakespearean references. I think that if I was a Shakespearean scholar, I might have focused on that theme. I'm not a big Shakespeare fan and missed understanding fully a number of those references. But if you're a Shakespeare fan, there's lots to be gained from this book. So suicide, unfortunately we had a number of characters who had poor starts in life and ended up committing suicide. No, from a legal point of view, I've always thought this was interesting. Committing suicide is not illegal because, of course, the person dies, but attempted suicide is a crime. Our law does not allow us to take our own lives, does not sanction that. So if you attempt and you're unsuccessful, that is a crime. So another theme in this book that I really loved is magic. So there were a number of references to magic. So one thing is we're told that Duchess's dad often performed with magicians and escape artists. We saw Duchess himself do the trick over dinner when they were at Wooly's sister's house, where he put a cork in a bottle and then extracted the cork, arranged for the cork did the trick so that the cork popped out of the bottle. There was an interesting side story there. You may remember Duchess taught the others at the table, the other Billy and Emmett, on how to do it, and they took wine, expensive wine, from the sisters' wine cabinet and emptied the bottles in order to practice the trick. And then Dennis, the husband, comes home and he's very unhappy that all this expensive wine has just been, they didn't even drink it, they just threw it down the sink in order to clear the bottles to practice the trick. There was and then Duchess at first wouldn't tell the others how he did the trick, because a magician takes an oath of that saying that he or she will never disclose how the trick is done. But he did in the end. There was a reference to Mandrake, the magnificent magician, who is apparently a syndicated cartoon strip. He used a cockatoo named Lucinda as his assistant, and then at one point in the act we're told, you think that or he disappears the cockatoo, the bird, and you think then that the bird is going to reappear, and in fact it's a cooked bird on a tray, so that it turns out the audience is led to believe that this poor bird was cooked in order to make the trick. Then there was a reference to Alibaba and his magic carpet. And then the part that I liked the best was Wooly talked about going to FAO Schwartz every Christmas in order to pick out their Christmas gift. And he referenced the magician, and he talked about how the magician makes a jack of diamonds disappear. So the magician in me wonders, how did he do that? So there's numerous ways that he might have done it. Let me show you a few. So, jack of diamonds. We have a cylinder here. I'm going to put the jack of diamonds in the cylinder, and we're going to see if we can make it disappear. So we'll go abracadabra, and now, let's see, no jack of diamonds. He might have done it a different way. So he might have taken a jack of diamonds and a magic bag and put the jack, let me show you, nothing in here. And he might have put that jack of diamonds in the magic bag and then said some more magic words. We'll go with hocus pocus this time. And now the jack of diamonds appears to be gone. So there could have been, however, another way that he might have done it. He might have had a magic box and take a jack of diamonds, put it in the magic box, close it, and now this time we'll go with razzle dazzle and no jack of diamonds. So it's possible that any of these could have been how that magician at FAO Schwartz disappeared the jack of diamonds. But we don't know, that wasn't indicated. A few other issues I see. What timing? We have a few more minutes. The school disciplinary hearings. There was a reference to one of these because Willie had burned the thesaurus in the football field, you may recall, and fire spread causing damage to the goalposts. He was going to be expelled from the boarding school, one of 3 that he was expelled from, and there was a hearing, and as Woolley told it, the folks who were testifying against him and the judges were very unsympathetic to his position. He felt like he was being railroaded in the hearing. What was interesting to me is that if you happen to be a Harry Potter fan, one of my favorite scenes from the Harry Potter stories is the hearing where Harry is on trial to be expelled from Hogwarts. And what I love about it is that it so clearly indicates violations of due process. In this country, we have a constitutional right to due process. We have a right to a lawyer. We have a right to notice if we're being accused of something, and time to prepare a defense, notice where the hearing is going to be. We have a right to an unbiased judge. We have a right to cross-examine witnesses against us to try and discredit them, and we have a right to present witnesses. in that hearing, which is much more detailed than the hearing in Lincoln Highway. Harry is denied, the school attempts to deny Harry of most of those things. They changed the time and location at the very last minute, so he almost misses the whole hearing. The judges try to prevent him from cross-examining a key witness against him and wanted to prevent him from presenting a witness who favored his side of the case. So I thought it was interesting. I guess it may be a natural if you have telling story about young kids, a thing that all of them have in common, of course, is school, and some are going to be expelled. Maybe it's not surprising that those scenes are in both of these books, but I enjoyed the reference to the attempt, the hearing, and to expel both Harry and, in this case, Wooly. Religion. Interesting. There's that Pastor John, who is the worst. He's conniving, he's shrewd, he abuses Billy, he hits Billy, he steals. He's all under the guise of being a man of the cloth. In the same chapter, there's reference to Jews. The references to the 47th Street Jews. Pastor John wants those silver dollars of Billy, and Pastor John is going to take them to 47th Street to negotiate with the Jews, though he said that they can't be trusted to give him a good price. So these are stereotypes. We know that there are issues with religions. I don't understand why the book is reinforcing these stereotypes. So that's what I have to say about the religion. There was an interesting issue of friends versus acquaintances. So there was this storyline about whether you can make a friend and how many days does it take of knowing somebody to elevate them from an acquaintance to a friend. And I think that it came up because I think that Emmett was trying to contain Billy's enthusiasm in meeting new people and not wanting him to get too friendly and give away too much about who they were and where they were headed. But it was an interesting theory. There was also, Billy met that lady in the bus station. That's really where the issue began, and they had apparently a lovely conversation, and Emmett was trying to discourage Billy from making these kinds of friends. And then the relationship between Billy and Ulysses, there was the issue of when were they going to be friends as opposed to just acquaintances. I thought this was an interesting focus. My view of the world is nurture acquaintances so they all become friends. Both are very valuable in life. There's numerous other topics in this book that time just doesn't allow further discussion on. But some I would throw out to you are Ulysses, the whole story with Ulysses, evening the score, the issues about evening the score with somebody. If they've wronged you, you wrong them. Or if you've wronged them, they get to wrong you. The circus story, the whole scene with the circus and the brothel. Professor Abernathy and Wooly's fascination with the book about heroes, both real and fantasy. Wooly's sister Sarah, there's some storylines. Emmett and Billy's neighbor Sally, nuns at Duchess's orphanage, bust of Abe Lincoln at Wooly's family's summer home. All of these car thefts, including Willie and the fire truck, hunt by the work camp farm for the missing boys. I thought that was interesting. I was surprised that the work camp was not more aggressive in trying to find the two boys who had escaped. We hear that they made contact with family members but didn't seem to follow up. There was the restaurant Limoncello and the house specialty fettuccine mio amore. the postpartum issue of Emmett and Billy's mom, the reference to Howard Johnson's in the 29 flavors. I thought that was fun. Traveling salesman, etc. So lots of things that in 600 pages there's a lot of material and lots of other storylines that could have been covered. I thought the book was quirky. The countdown from chapters 10 to 1 instead of 1 to 10 was sort of interesting. It was also interesting that the chapters were in first person only for two of the characters, for Duchess and Sarah, and the rest were not first person. The title, Lincoln Highway. So of course there is a highway. It is the Lincoln Highway. It was the first highway to go all across America. Starts in New York City and goes to Times Square and goes to San Francisco. This was an interesting fact I discovered. When it was first constructed, enthusiasts had painted red, white, and blue stripes on barns and fence posts all along the route. So that must have been fun both to do if you were on the route, probably took great pride, and also to as sort of signposts as you're following the route. I think the reference in the title is much more than the actual highway. I think it refers to a goal. It was Lincoln Highway. It was a goal for them that they had to, for the kids, that they, Emmett and Billy, that they had to keep working towards the idea of a goal. Also, Lincoln it has multiple meanings in the book. Billy was attracted to those Abe Lincoln statues. The Lincoln Highway begins at 42nd and Broadway going west. To get under the Hudson, you must, in the past, it was a ferry that you took, and now it's the Lincoln Tunnel. There was those busts of Abe Lincoln in the study at Willie's family home, another reference to Lincoln. Willie's great-grandfather loved Abe Lincoln, and he had, because he said Abe Lincoln had the courage to perfect the Union. And he, of course, took great strides. We don't yet have a perfect Union, but Abe Lincoln took us a long way along that path. And then the combination for the safe at Willie's family summer home, they couldn't figure it out. Willie didn't know it, and Duchess was banging away trying to break the safe because he couldn't get in. And Billy comes up with it. Billy, who's so attracted to these Abe Lincoln statues, he comes up with the number, it's 1119, because Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was given on November 19th, 1119. So I loved all those allusions to the Lincoln Highway. 2 minutes about the author, Amir Towles, American novelist born in 1964, making him currently age 58. Born and raised in Boston, graduated Yale College, has an MA in English from Stanford. He began as an investment banker and was a banker from 1991 to 2012, so almost 20 years and then some. But his first book was The Rules of Civility, a year in the life of a 25-year-old seeking to survive and thrive in Depression area Manhattan. It was unexpectedly successful, and it was so successful that it enabled him to retire from investment banking and pursue writing full-time. And so then we got A Gentleman in Moscow, a New York Times bestseller for 59 weeks, more than a year. That is pretty impressive. And there is a television series that's in production. And then The Lincoln Highway was published October 5th of 2021, chosen by Amazon as the best book of 2021, which is really impressive. There are so many twists and turns in the book. Another person could have filled a whole review talking about totally different topics. But these are the ones that stood out to me that I found fun, and I hope that they were of interest to you. So I would love to hear what vignettes and storylines excited you, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, who we got? Who do we have with any questions or comments? Someone over there?
No, I was just waiting.
She's just waving. I was wondering, just to get us going, if at the end, from a legal standpoint, when Duchess goes away on the boat, what are the odds that these other boys are going to be tied to something? Like, when I read it, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think of it as suicide. I was like, they kind of tricked him knowing where his mind would go towards the money, but what would be like the legality of that?
Well, they definitely tricked him. So the boat, you remember, had a hole in it. It was filled with stones, and the money apparently was placed on the bow of the boat, and Duchess was on the stern. Wind comes up, and the money is flying all around. Duchess is very concerned about the money. For him to change his position on the boat and reach out, the hole is gonna, the stone on the boat, as I understand it, is gonna get dislodged, the water's gonna come in, or the boat will capsize and Duchess can't swim. So the fact that Duchess couldn't swim was known to Emmett and Billy. Interesting, because Duchess had the option of not going after the money, it probably would not be able to result in criminal action against Billy and Emmett. Though I'm interested, other lawyers in the audience, if anybody has any other way of that you might view that differently.
Anyone comments? No, there's just a lot to think about in this book because there were so many storylines.
So many storylines.
So much going on.
One of the things that I was interested in as a scene was of damaged children whose parents had damaged them, which to me is the basis for all the adventures that they had and why some of the different characters did the things that they did. Because, you know, even the girl from next door leaves, what's her name?
Sally.
Sally. But each of the boys had lost their mother and their father didn't do much for them. But the other one had lost his father, and both of them, instead of the parents, especially the rich parents, of saving Woody from having to go to the place, they just send him off. But I also thought he was damaged in a different way. I was wondering whether he had something like a very serious case of attention deficit disorder, because he obviously had a lot of trouble thinking.
Yes, and that really is, I touched on the fact that upbringing is so important. The role of a parent is so critical in society. I don't know that we as a society reinforce that enough, but